is Behind the Games from newoverlords.com, where we seek creators of all kinds to find out what's behind our favorite games. With your hosts, Jeff and Seema.
This is New Overlords Behind the Games podcast, and from our Midwest studio, I'm Jeff Elamek.
And from our Northeast studio, I'm Seema.
The Earthlock game series and Ikone Island from Snowcastle Games are great. We're going to talk a lot about them. When I saw that Snowcastle would be at PAX, I made sure to stop by. At PAX, I got to hear about the studio more and all the great game studios that are in the Nordics, which is really exciting. And from there, I knew we needed to hear more. So to do that, we're joined by founder and creative director Bendik Stang and marketing lead Nicholas Rajan. Bendik and Nick, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Hey, it was really good. Nick was the one I talked to most at PAX. That was quite fun. You guys had a great setup. It was really engaging. I hadn't played Ikone Island before I got there, but the art, the design of that game just really kind of pulls you in, and your sort of display all showed it off really well. But then, when we started talking about development in Norway and Snowcastle's a studio, it really sounded really interesting. So I'm glad that we're here today. I'm glad that we get to talk about it. I want to talk a ton about the Nordics and game dev and Snowcastle, but first, because it is so exciting and I've played a ton of it, let's talk about the games. Let's talk about Ikone and then Earthlock in general, the sort of the cinematic universe.
You want to start by telling the story behind Earthlock and how we kind of got started?
This is back in 2013. We had just launched an iPad adventure game called Hug World, which was about a hug bunny called Gnart and his adventure. It's a story about xenophobia. And then from there on, we decided to just continue in that universe and make all our games in the Earthlock universe, basically, from there on. And Earthlock was the first game, a proper game, big game for us at that time. I think we were 6 people when we started. And it was basically a conversation internally about making a Western RPG or Eastern RPG. So we ended up with turn-based combat, more like a JRPG. And it was just a passion project. Everybody loved role-playing games in general. More people loved Eastern role-playing games. So that's kind of the reason behind everything. And then we just set off to make the game. And we prototyped it in 2013 and showed it at the very same PAX for the first time. And that gave us so much positive feedback. So we just continued that way. And I think it was in 2014, we did a Kickstarter. Initially, we launched a Kickstarter just before Christmas, around Black Friday. And that was a really bad decision. So we stopped that Kickstarter and relaunched again in February, March.
It just sort of got lost in the shuffle of everything that was going on.
If you do your homework before doing a Kickstarter, you just don't do it at that time. We didn't know.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So the relaunch of that Kickstarter was really successful, and everything hinged on that. So we would get some grants from the Norwegian Film Institute if it was successful. If it wasn't, we would be bankrupt, basically. So we made it. I can't remember what we asked for, but we got $200 and something thousand, and that was more than enough. And then that also triggered the free grants from the Norwegian Film Institute, and so
nice.
That was really scary and exciting at the same time.
That's a fascinating part, and we don't do this in the United States that I know of in the U.S., but we have heard about it in Canada. And in a couple other places. I think Sweden, the creative institutes funding, providing grants and funding to do interesting things with technology, interesting things with the arts, and when those two things come together, people get excited as well. So games has been a good place for some of that to happen. That seems great. I applaud those art programs doing that, and the fact that you guys got a jump start with a Kickstarter plus that seems excellent. And Earthlock itself, and I haven't played through the Earthlock series, but I did watch a bunch of videos, and I watched some streamers and watched the gameplay. It's excellent. It looks really good. So it was a really solid foundation in putting together that kind of RPG and the turn-based combat and assembling your little team, and they have their abilities, and it's what you would expect from that kind of thing, and it seems to flow really well. But that sort of so tell me about that decision to make that sort of a cinematic universe, because I think that's fascinating. And then you did Earthlock 2, and
yeah, it was as a startup game developer, you go to all these conferences and talk to investors and publishers and all of that. And back then, I think that was probably around 2013. I was listening to a lot of different investors and publishers, and one of them said something that I felt resonated with me, and that was that if you build an IP, it's really difficult and takes a lot of time. But if you build an IP, you get so much more value than each of the different games or whatever products.
That makes so much sense.
So I was just thinking about this in the long run, and it made sense because then you build on what you've done previously. And I have other friends' studios in Norway who typically would make one game of something, and then they would make something completely different. And then in a way, you start from scratch every time you launch your game.
Right.
But now, if we had that strategy that we decided on, then every time you make a new game, you build on your previous games in that universe, and people get to know the characters and the universe. And the Earthlock universe is different. It's a planet that stops spinning. So one side of the planet always faces the sun, and the other is always in darkness. And that's really weird because there's no sense of time. The sun doesn't move, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's a very different universe, and it's hard to work with in a way because it's really hard to wrap your head around. But it's also really exciting because it's so different.
The idea of creating an IP that resonates with me in a couple of ways. One is I've always worked in technology and done technology projects. I'm always looking for ways to create platforms from a technology perspective, so that the next project is easier and we can expand and we can do other things and we can move on top of it. The idea of an IP is a thematic platform. I hadn't really thought about it in this way, but it just popped into my head when you were talking, which is if you want to tell more stories, if you've got an IP, now you have a framework, a platform to tell stories. Mm-hmm. And, and you probably have art assets that you could, or at least style and storyboards and things that you could reuse. So having that jumping off point, that platform to tell more stories in that universe, that does sound really, really attractive.
And as a player, to me also, I mean, the same with books and movies, well, less with movies, but the quicker I can get into something, the happier I am. And if I have to spend a lot of time sort of figuring out, and it gets only worse as I get older.
Right.
I lose patience faster or something. So yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, and we have been, trying to work off that because we know that based off of all these years working with Earthlock, that the feedback is always positive when it comes to the art style, when it comes to the world building. Mm-hmm. And we've made comics around it, and we continue to plan to expand the universe, and there's so much you can do with it. And it just becomes more clear that was the right decision the more we work with it.
So you had Earthlock. Talk about Earthlock 2 and then the transition to Ikone, because that's a different game, a different property in that IP, in that cinematic universe, which really sort of builds on it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a journey from Earthlock 1 to Earthlock 2 because we launched Earthlock 1 on Games with Gold in 2016, I think it was in August or September. And it was really well received on the Xbox. And then we continued to publish on Steam and on PlayStation. And once we'd done that, we were like, okay, done, let's move on to Earthlock 2. But getting that game out was really hard in terms of finances. So we barely got the game out, even with the Kickstarter and all of that, and the deal with Games with Gold. We barely got the game out and had to make lots of cuts. So as we were going into pre-production on Earthlock 2, for the first time. A month and a half or so passed, and we as a team weren't really happy with where Earthlock 1 was. And so we decided to stop Earthlock 2 and go back to Earthlock 1. We also knew that the Switch was coming out soon. So we decided we should make what we internally called the should have been edition, the way Earthlock 1 was intended to be, and then publish that on the Switch, and then of course also on the other consoles with an update. But then the change was so vast to the game that we couldn't make it backwards compatible. So we decided to make a different SKU, completely different products. And then we launched that on Switch as the first platform, but also then as a new product on Xbox and PlayStation, where we had Microsoft and Sony and Valve or Steam make entitlements to anyone who owned the original version. They would then get the new version for free instead of people having to buy the same, like the what do you call them?
Because we have the first one was called Festival of Magic.
Yeah.
And then the new one is just called simply Earthlock. So anybody who owned the previous version got upgraded for free, which took some finagling with the
right. That I think you were telling me that didn't exist. That idea to give away a new game for free to people that are already purchased another game, and
so Nintendo manually had to do that. That was a bit hard sell for us, but they agreed eventually, and so we gave the game away to everybody who bought the original because we were so appreciative to people buying our first game, and we didn't feel it was right, even though we see in general people sell the same game again as a extended edition or a Dr. Scott or whatever.
And Game of the Year edition, extended edition, ultimate edition.
Or there should have been edition, as we call it. Yeah.
But some of my favorite studios and do this where they put the fans first, and that's what you guys are doing here, and it's something I respect so much. You put a product out, it's a great product, people love it, they spend a bunch of time in it, and they would have been fine with it, but in your hearts you wanted something more, you wanted something else, you put that out, and then you said, well, hey, all these people that started this the first time, let's give this to them. And in doing that, you get all of the people then that are new and hearing about it. You'll still get all of those people as well. It still grows the game, but it's such a positive thing for the community that you currently have, I feel.
It was also a decision that was easier to make because we had decided on building the IP, and as Earthlock was the cornerstone for that IP, it had to be good. It had to be properly good, and we couldn't leave that game not as good as we wanted it to be, basically. So that's also a decision that was easier because we knew we were going to make Earthlock 2, and we also on our Kickstarter promised to make Earthlock 3, and we intend to keep
okay. Excellent. That's good to know. There's a hint for the future.
Yeah.
And then you transitioned, and this is sort of a sidestep into a different type of game to some degree. So why don't we talk about Ikone Island a little bit, because this is the kind of game that I really, really like. So you describe it, and then I'll talk about what I've done in the game. And
further on the story, it gets even more complicated in a way, because we went back to Earthlock 2. But at that time, after having launched Earthlock again on all platforms and gotten it translated to 12 languages, that was, I think, August 2018. We also looked at switching our game engine from Unity to Unreal. And we were 18 people then with probably mostly 8 years experience in Unity. And it was a big cost to switch to a different game engine, but we did. And we're really happy about that. But it took a lot of time to get into the new engine and get productive. And also then we were building the studio. So we grew from I think we were 12 people to some 18 and then 20, 25 people.
Mm-hmm.
While we were learning Unreal, developing and pre-producing Earthlock 2 at the same time, and we're getting into some severe growing pains. And as we were making Earthlock 2, it was just dysfunctional. We hadn't gotten things working properly internally. So we restructured the company, got mid-management in place, producers. We didn't have producers before. All of a sudden we had 2 producers, and things started to become streamlined. But instead of then working on Earthlock 2, which was at that time a bit of a hot potato, we paused that project. And then in February 2019, 2019?
No, last year, right?
19, 20. So 2 years in February this year. We then started on blank slate and started producing Econai Island, and that was so smooth because now we had all the right structure. We'd kind of gotten our company act together. Really, we were able to produce this in a completely different way from the beginning, and it's been a project in comparison to the Earthlock 2 prototyping we did. It's been like completely streamlined, and never produced a game as fast as we're doing now. And with the same.
And do you feel like you'll be able to do that going forward now with new games?
Now we have a proper production pipeline set up with we're always trying to become better, but I feel really good now.
I'll want to come back to some of that production pipeline and how things work and the growing pains, because that's a really interesting part of studio operations that I think it helps for everyone to learn about.
And we don't hear a lot of people saying they switched from
that too. We should touch on that, because I've been thinking hard about Unreal. I'm a Unity developer myself, just a tiny bit. I mean, I'm a developer, but I learned Unity. I've done some things in it, but we'll get to that. Econai Island, it's survival plus adventure plus a little bit of discovery. But I like the sort of like the gathering type games, that sort of the gathering, building, survival kind of feel. But it's very low pressure, so it's not survival as much as it's the gathering and crafting, and then go on and explore the different areas and solve the different areas to some degree. You want to cleanse the shrines.
Yes.
I played it. I know you guys haven't QA'd it yet, and that's potentially something you'll look at, but I played it all on my Steam Deck. This was my, I'm trying to relax in the evening, or I'm laying in bed at night, or I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like just jumping out of bed just yet. Pop on the Steam Deck, Econai Island. I played it a lot. I played it all the way through. I played it, so it's early access still. I played it as far as you can, which pauses the story and it explains. So we're sort of, you've done it. You've cleansed all the shrines. Great job. This is where our story ends for now. The other piece of the game that I really like is you get these animal companions along the way, and there's a series of them. There's each of the animal companions is sort of an extra tool for doing some of the gathering in the game, and breaking through some other areas and solving a couple other things. And you have to sort of like level up the animals. So I leveled up all my animals. I was compelled to. But no pressure, and I really like that. I really like sort of that casual ability to come at it, to leave it at any time, to come back to it any time, and continue to play it through. But it still pulls you along because you've got these different zones to explore. You've got new animals to go out there and find. You've got the new pirate camps to go clear out, which then gets you more inventory and new weapons to sort of build. I got my vibranium sword. I forgot what the top end sword is right now, but got my vibranium sword, so I could hit the little blobs and get more resources. But I had to finish leveling up my animals as well, because there are things you can't get through. There's places you can't get to, or there's things you can't unlock. And I got the wolf, the little dog wolf animal, and I found he's a digger. So he'll dig stuff up in the ground for you. So if you find these little piles, he'll dig some. But I found these ones that have like a big X, like a treasure mark on it. I got really excited. I'm like, oh, what is in there? And like, oh, he needs to be a 3-star dog. You need to level him up to the top level.
A clip of the last 45 seconds and like use it for marketing promotion.
This is what it's compelled. My
summarizing.
I just wanted to get to and then hear your take on the game loops, which sort of make it compelling to sort of keep going. And then the last thing, which I didn't do a lot of myself, but I could see be really compelling for other people, is the building of your home, your base. I set it up in an area that was close to a shrine I could travel to and from, the first one you get to, but you can collect a lot of different decorations. You could switch to a big tree house. You could do all of these. That is a little side piece of the game that I could see being really compelling. So tell me about switching from an RPG, sort of the turn-based exploration discovery RPG, to a little more of the crafting survival-esque kind of thing, and these game loops that you develop. Because now that I've been talking for a half hour, I'm just so pleased by this game.
Yeah, Earthlock Ikonei Island, it was intended as a new kind of series, I'd say. So you have the Earthlock series, which are RPG or role-playing games, and then Ikonei would be the first game in what we call internally the Tale series. So those are more casual, friendly, family games, and this is then the first one in that series. We intend to make more of those.
Excellent.
Ikonei Island, I think for me was after having had a play session with my 3 kids. I have a son who's at that time was 15 and a daughter who was 9 and 11. And it was a rainy, shitty weekend, and we were just indoors playing Stardew Valley together, the 4 of us, and we had so much great fun. And it's really hard when you have a family with a boy 15 and a youngest girl at 9, and me, and all of us finding something to do, which we all find really fun. And we had that session, and I think that is a big inspiration for Ikonei. It's intended as a multiplayer game from the get-go, though multiplayer is coming in the next patch. And then yes, fun, quirky, chill gameplay. A lot of one of the gameplay pillars is Dollhouse, just decorating and having fun together. Mm-hmm. So that was the initial thought, and that's also what we're making. So we're stuck to that.
I get that idea of that vision to be able to sort of make it like that family-friendly kind of game, and I think it works really well. In fact, I've recommended it to people when they start to ask, "Hey, I'm looking for a game for my kids." This is a perfect of that kind of game, because it's lower pressure. There's a little bit of the combat in there, but it's nothing. It's not. We're not talking about Elden Ring in any way. There's no nothing where you're gonna be overwhelmed by that. But then there's enough depth in the other systems where no matter the skill range, no matter the experience with gaming that the kid's family or adult might be, there's depth that you can explore and get a lot out of it at any level. And for better for worse, I like Dollhouse games. I don't know why I say for worse. I always like them. I like having base building in any game. It may be that some hardcore sci-fi or playing games like Rust, or running around shooting other people, or a game like this. As you said, Stardew Valley. There's a little bit of that in there. You're setting up your little farm and you're designing it how you want and planting your garden. I planted my garden in Ikonei. I grew the things that I need, the preferred foods to feed to my animals, all of that kind of thing. So I would imagine, though, that it's a challenge to try to hit that sweet spot where you've got enough depth to engage an adult, but it's still discoverable and playable enough for somebody in the 6, 8, 10-year-old range.
I mean, we've only gone through one major early access update since we launched in August, which was the Creature Care update. And a lot of that is basically anybody can get attached to their animal companions who are helping them throughout their entire journey, no matter what kind of skill level is required. It's not a skill-based thing. It's a feel-based thing. And with the multiplayer update coming, Bendik has always said it's one thing to be creative in this game, but to be creative together is a whole nother feeling that we're trying to evoke. And the decorative dollhouse part, that pillar will kind of really shine when the multiplayer comes into action, because then you could have all the players building a massive base wherever they want to, like you said, next to the first shrine, or you could have all 4 players going and claiming their biome like Shrek in the swamp.
Yeah.
Okay, this is interesting. So there's 4 characters to sort of choose from, and you can flip back and forth between any of them if you're playing solo.
Mm-hmm.
You can just sort of bounce back in between. So I picked one. I picked the little girl with the fuzzy hair, and she ran around. She was my character. I grabbed another character and you sort of used it as storage, the little bunny girl or whatever. So I just sort of used her as storage. I felt a little bad. And then the other 2 dudes, I just left them on the beach. Mm. But now I can see I didn't really think about that in terms of multiplayer, grabbing one of those and making that yours, and you're each adventuring and then building together. Yeah, that is interesting. So I'd love to see what, like, and I have 3 kids that are all older now, but as a parent, I imagine I could really love to see what my kids would build and be in that world with them. So that does sound like a really amazing.
I mean, especially, I'm thinking of your kids, but my family too, where we're in all different cities. Yeah. I mean, is your vision that you could play it on whichever supported console?
Yes.
And still play in the same game? Okay.
And
excellent.
The premise of the story is that you have these 4 orphans who then gets to this island where pirates are abusing nature and capturing all the animals and putting them in cages and selling them off on the black animal market. And you as kids then save the island, help save the animals, get rid of the pirates, and make the island your own. So it's a nice story about these kids finding their own place. And it's an intention for something to happen there later on, probably, without spoiling exactly what we're going to do. So it's a story about feel good and chill, as you said.
Yeah, very different from Earthlock, which was a grand saving the universe kind of RPG adventure.
Yeah. And Earthlock 1 was also a more or less 25-hour linear narrative. It's the role playing game, so it's not quite linear, but it's a fairly linear story. Econai Island is more about giving the player creativity or ability to be creative, and I think that is personally preferable in games, as you said, even in role-playing games where you can create your own stuff. We had a little bit of that in Earthlock 1, where you have your own garden where you grow your own spuds, and you use a spud gun for combat, so you grow your own ammo. That was kind of the...
I like that.
I like saving the world, but I don't want to save the world every day.
Right.
So I like having options like you're talking about with Econai Island.
Which I think, again, was a reason that it really worked like this for me, because I could just pop in there and I could tend to the garden or grab my dog and go find some treasure and some materials and whatever, but come back and still have progression and a world to save ultimately by the end.
I think you're probably our most experienced Steam Deck QA tester.
Let me know if you have any questions on it. I think I told you before, I played it. You told me it hadn't been QA'd. We didn't, and if you look on Steam, it says that this is just unknown. Steam says, yes, this is a Steam Deck game or not. It plays great. It plays great. And I'm not really a controller player typically. I'm mouse and keyboard for the 90% of the games I play. But it played great. The controls felt great. So if anybody wants to sort of try it in early access, I wouldn't steer them away from that, because I didn't it wasn't one of those situations where I felt like I wanted to go back to or needed to go back to my desk to do anything. And that in my mind is a mark of a really good Steam Deck game. So worked really well there. All right. So this kind of game I love, and as you said, it's going to continue to expand. It's in early access now. Let's talk a little bit about. Well, let's get into more of the sort of the studio and how you're building these things. Because as you said, you switched over. So is Ikone Island in Unreal? So
Yes.
You're all Unreal now, right? Okay. So that switch from you had so many switches that they talk about life changes. You know, if you buy a house and you get your first job, you know, then you're going to have a whole bunch of stress on you. In companies, there are changes when you're changing like a big tech platform and the tool set you're using. That's a big change. When you're growing, I feel there are thresholds. There are thresholds from about, you know, something around 5 or 6 to 12. That's a big change. 12 to 25, I feel is a really big change as well. And then 25, right around 35 to 50 is another sort of big milestone. So you were going through, as you said, these big changes that can really impact both the operation of the team and what you can even accomplish, either create a lot of friction and blow everything up, or as in your case, you sort of really got through it. So let's go back to both of those. Let's start with the organizational one, and then we'll do the Unity versus Unreal and why you made that change. But organizationally, you said you added in the product managers. Or what is the role that you call program management? Producers. So you added that in. Were there any other sort of roles in that next stage that you had to add to sort of solidify the studio and get it to operate?
Yeah, so we had those. For example, on our art department, we tried something where normally you have an art department and then you have an art director who is responsible for the art direction, but also the art team. We split that into 2 different roles. So you have art lead, who's like a person who's really good with people and is managing the people on the team. And then you have the art director who is directing the art. And not having those 2 people in the same person is as we experience it, way better, preferable than taking the art director and giving that person a lot of extra like HR responsibilities and management responsibilities. But that's
I'm a big proponent of that in any business. You try to take some of these really great creators or engineers or technical people, and they're doing such a great job. And then you say to them, you're doing such a great job. Now we're going to make you manage people.
Right.
And
right.
For one, they may or may not be good at it. For 2, they may or may not want to do that. Hey, I'm a creator, and now you're asking me to spend half my time or more in people management, which is a very specific set of skills and needs to be done very well to run an organization. It can work in rare cases, and in some organizations that's just the way it works. But I think your approach is spot on, and you probably experience with that in other businesses as well. The other thing, as a studio grows, this is something for anyone who's sort of like thinking about studio sizes or thinking about any business as it's growing, putting the right people management in place and putting that in place early. Even if it's just one person who sort of like oversees people management and career management and sort of the people as a resource. Are people taking their vacation? Do they have a career path? You know, are they feeling like they're developing? Are you asking those questions of your people? Putting a person in place that does that I think is brilliant.
I mean, as a lead myself, I think all of the leads have the responsibility to kind of check in on their team and make sure that they feel like they can grow in the position, and asking the right questions to the people you're working with. That's all very important at Snowcastle.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that we managed to get through the growing pains is also a good company culture. One of the things I really want people to appreciate is that you're supposed to make mistakes in a way. We're making a game. It's always uncharted territory in many respects. So we have to go out and we have to try. And doing so, we will make mistakes. But then you have to own that mistake and be proud of it in a way and share it with the others so we don't do the same mistake again. It's really, really hard because our culture is like, oh, I did a mistake, I'm going to be quiet about it. But it's so much better to be safe to try and make a mistake than be afraid of doing that. Because at the end of the day, game development is always pushing the boundaries in a way. And so you have to be safe to try.
That's interesting. I feel like culture in an organization needs to be something that everyone participates in and really needs to sort of be led by the senior leadership. It needs to be something that they are out there doing and showing. And then all layers of sort of like the organization, if there are, even if it's relatively flat, any of the people managers, the kinds of, even the way you ask questions of your people, and the way you do reviews of progress and things like that, it needs to flow down from the top because, and then you need to set the example from the top so that people really believe it. You can say, hey, we want people to make mistakes and feel, and feel challenged and try to do things different. But if the people at the top never do or never explain their mistakes or challenges, or they never take vacation, or they then people down below they know and they're gonna mimic, they're gonna take the lead from the leaders and not necessarily just from the words on the page.
And this is probably interesting for you guys across the pond, as we say, in America. We have about 5 weeks vacation in Norway. There's a 9-month maternity leave. We work 37.5 hours a week. And
and look how much you've been able to do too. Like, we've talked to studios that haven't put 3 games out in 4 years. Your time frame is really incredible.
Yeah, and my job is more trying to make sure that people don't work too much rather than push them to work harder.
Yes.
And you mentioned a word, the flat structure. This is a bit funny because I was at a Nordic game conference, and the Nordics are known to be rather flat structure, right? And we had a panel debate about just that. And it's actually not a flat structure because you can't have a lot of people without having a hierarchy. You have to have different roles with different responsibilities. But what's perceived as flat structure is just a mutual respect, which I find very important because that creates a very, very nice and safe and working environment. Yeah. And that's the difference between flat structure and just being nice to each other.
Culturally flat, interpersonally flat, but organizationally, you have the right structure to make the teams work and that kind of thing. That makes a ton of sense. Yeah, all of that really is great. And then on the people management side, like you were saying, Nick, we did an episode. I was just looking it up. It was episode 8 of ours with a guy named Hector Padilla who works at IO Interactive. And he's just a people manager in a medium-sized game company then. And just all of these kinds of concepts, I think you're spot on in understanding people management as a separate discipline and thinking about it in that way. And even if you do other things, like you're the marketing lead of your marketing team, treating it as a separate hat and understanding the role for what it needs to happen and what it needs to be is excellent. And that's the way to grow a studio. On the technical side, as you said, Unity versus Unreal. That's a fun conversation. A lot of people love to fight, fight about it on the internet. I've just started to talk to, in fact, we're going to talk to another solo indie developer who's mostly solo. We're going to talk to him soon about his use of Unreal. And he was there at PAX as well. And one thing he told me, which sort of struck me, was is the structure is so different that he felt like he had to be much more of a coder inside of Unity. It's C# and so a lot of coding, but the flexibility of things like the nanites and the node system in Unreal, it's very, very different. So if you had Unity developers, like a team of Unity developers that have been doing it for 8 years, to switch to Unreal, just even from what I've seen, what people like that have said, that seems like it would be a very daunting challenge.
It was.
Why did you do it? And then how did that work out?
It seemed like at least an important evaluation, because we're done with Earthlock 1, and now was the time to at least consider changing. And so I met with Epic. We had our team do some evaluation internally. Our art team was all for switching to Unreal. Our coders was very skeptical. But we were
okay.
Player game, and Unreal is multiplayer out of the box, right? So that was a big pro to switch to Unreal. And then I met with Mike Gamble and Ben Board at Epic, and I just said, to me, this is personal. Snowcastle is my child. I built this company. It's very personal to me. So I had friends at Unity. They all left. I don't know anyone at Unity anymore. But if I'm going to switch to Unreal, I need to get to know you guys at Epic. And then they promised that. They sent people to our studio. I was invited to their studio and on other events. I got to know them. So that was a very big deal for me personally, building our company on that tech. Of course, it was a huge financial risk because we wouldn't be able to produce anything for at least half a year, just getting into the new engine. But now looking back, all our coders are super happy. So it was
sweet.
That seems like a really inspiring business tactic. I have trouble even framing it. You saying, here's a partnership that I'm going to be staking my company on. I'm going to reach out and ensure that this is going to be a partnership. And then Epic and the Unreal team responding and creating that partnership. That's great from both sides. The fact that they would make that investment and that we're seeking that out, and we're going to make sure that you had those kinds of relationships in place. The game engine, sometimes I think of the game engines as it's just some tools that we're going to use. We're making our game. But if we think back to how games used to be made 20 years ago, those kind of game engines didn't exist. You would code all of this plumbing from scratch. You would code, multiplayer from scratch. Everything, you'd reinvent the wheel every time you at a new game studio doing a new thing. The opportunity to build on top of something provides a ton of jumpstart, but it is a huge amount of the game. It does sort of define a lot of what's going on under the covers. So I could see being very hesitant to just jump into a new platform, as you're saying, and you can't take that decision lightly. And then there are financial implications, of how those platforms work as well.
We also had some. I mean, when you use Unity, unless you have bought the source code, which is really expensive, you totally rely on a Unity updating any engine bug. You can't fix it yourself because you don't have access to the C++ source code. With Unreal, you do. And while launching Earthlock 1, we had some massive bugs in the engine that postponed our launch for 2 months, for example.
Oh, no.
I was like, and so that was another thing that weighed heavily on the decision for us, because we knew that if there was any problem at any time, we at least had the capacity to fix it ourselves and not just wait for someone to fix it out of our
right. Okay, that's really interesting. That's fascinating. I didn't realize that. One of the other things you said that was also interesting to me, which my sense of Unreal, it kind of makes sense, is that the art team was all for it. That the idea of the node-based type system that's very familiar to a lot of 3D artists and graphical artists, and even 2D art and digital art in general. I could see them being sort of really into that. It seems like a closer unification of the art and the platform than you have in Unity, and might be the kind of reason that they would really be going after it. Is that the case? Is that where that came from?
I think one of the different tests they did on the art side was they made some 3D models, and then they just put those direct into Unity, and then same assets into Unreal, and it just looked better in Unreal. So I think
that too.
Okay. A very simple test, and this is back in 2018. I don't know. I think Unity has upgraded their engine, so I don't know how it is now. But back then, that was also part of the art decision side.
Yeah, and we're not trying to create an
answer to which is best. Yeah,
because Unity is doing some new things. They've got there's some amazing games that you can play in there. My impression always was Unity for the more stylistic games tended to be where a lot of those games were built, and Unreal was this was my impression. Unreal is where a lot of the more sort of few photorealistic games were happening, because you could have the nanite system spread, realistic looking grass and trees all over the place, and those separation of styles is definitely breaking down. We're seeing some really amazing stylistic, top tier animation kind of things, even for small games being done in Unreal. Well, I'm seeing just so much more. I've got to get into Unreal.
I would must say, if you're a small team and you're making a game that isn't multiplayer and maybe it's very stylized, even 2D, there's a lot of sense to using Unity for that. If you're making a multiplayer game and you have a bigger budget, then Unreal is probably a better choice. So it very much depends on the project, I think.
Okay, well, we'll stop there until I get into it more. Maybe we'll get some people from both of those platform organizations on at some point to talk about it. One other thing I definitely wanted to talk about was game dev in Norway in general and in the Nordics, and some of the things that you're doing, almost becoming the opportunity for you to be central to the community of the developers. So why don't you talk about that, and then we'll lead into your advent calendar of studios from that discussion.
Yeah, I think the sense of community in the Norwegian and Nordic game development community is really strong. We very often help each other out. I don't think we perceive each other as competitors, more as friends. So it's quite often that we would reach out to other studios locally in Oslo or Norway, or even in Denmark and Sweden, and ask if they have solved some challenges that we're facing, or we have show and tells where we invite another studio in and they're looking at our broken prototype and then giving us feedback, stuff like that. It's great fun.
Amazing.
And it's like we're all helping each other, and it just works. And yeah,
I mean, it's much better that way than hiding all of your tech, because we are trying to grow as a community, Nordic game development community, not Snowcastle. I mean, we're obviously trying to grow as well, but in the long run, it's going to be way better for all of us the more that our whole conglomerate grows, because then the government is going to take notice. Then everybody, you're going to get more eyes on the developers in the region. So it makes sense that, especially for us, to work that way.
Yeah.
So you don't have this feeling like, oh, we better keep this under wraps, or else X bad thing is going to happen. Someone's going to steal our idea, or the financing will fall apart, or anything like that?
No, ideas are cheap. It's making them real, which is hard.
Wow.
Really.
I'm going to write that one down. I agree.
So yeah, I don't think I ever had any problems with people stealing ideas. On the contrary, but being able to talk about it and getting help from others and point of views and feedback is super valuable. So the benefit are way more valuable than the potential risks that I never encountered anyway.
I could not agree more, but we have heard that from game studios.
On the flip side of them wanting to sort of keep things close to the chest, or or what you're saying, because we've also heard this. Which
yes, we have.
seeing more of these concentrations of studios in different markets and developers, or at least leaders in the community, trying to sort of expand the game environment and the collaboration. It seems to be relatively geographically based, and I bet that might end up breaking down those geographic borders, but it seems to work well geographically. There's like the Boston scene right now, the Boston Indies and the Boston scene that I think is doing some really great things. We just talked a bunch in a recent episode about what's going on in Poland and in Warsaw and Krakow. CD Projekt Red was sort of like a big anchor, but then a bunch of small studios sort of spun out of that. What I'm seeing in these locations, and what you're probably experiencing as well, is the rising tide floats all boats. You get more quality talent. You get people moving back and forth because people change their careers. They're moving around all of the time anyway. So you get, if you're creating a set of talent outside of your organization, eventually you'll be able to pull that in as well. You'll be able to take those people and you'll be able to share them back and forth, and you'll be able to bring someone in for a new kind of project or a technology or a new game that you want to develop. That opportunity to grow the community such that everyone then has more of those resources available to them, that seems really, really positive to me. And I would want to be part of that, whatever game community I started to get involved in.
Yeah, and we even had Australians. So when we launched Earthlock 1, we had big problems with the H rating in Australia. And they were it's a government organization. They were going on summer holiday, so we got 1 day to send them, and they wouldn't take downloads. They had to get a DVD disc off our game. Otherwise, we'd probably be delayed another 2 months, and that would be a problem because we're going to launch with the Games with Gold in September, and so it was a huge problem. But then I reached out to some developers in Australia. Five Live Studio, former Bullfrog guys, Syndicate, if you remember the game from the 90s. And they downloaded the game, burned it on the DVD, and just walked across the street and gave it to them. And we...
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's friends in the industry, and making things happen.
I think.
So across the Nordics there, tell me, maybe Nick, you brought this up to me, introduced, and I didn't hear all of the details behind it yet, but this idea of like the advent calendar or like these other partner studios that you want to talk to and talk about, what's that idea and what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so actually it's great timing that you bring that up, because the announcement of this year's advent calendar, which is our 5th year, went live about 5 minutes ago.
Oh, excellent.
So, basically this started as a project, and it goes well with the previous topic of, giving back to the communities that kind of support all of the indie developers that we are, and B, getting to show off some of the cool games that we had in the Nordics at the time, 5 years ago. So we had an idea, one marketing meeting. I remember it had just started at Snowcastle, and within 2 hours, Bendik had already gotten like 15 games lined up from other indie developers. Basically, just to give away a game every day in December leading up to Christmas, and spotlight that developer on that day so that they get the eyeballs and some traffic that they wouldn't normally get otherwise, and give away some keys or whatever it is, so that we can really show the community that we appreciate how much they support all of us.
Yeah, it's like indies helping indies shine.
That's excellent. That's amazing. And again, really walking the walk of, hey, we're a game community. We all work together. That's you putting yourselves out there to sort of organize as a hub of making that really real between a whole bunch of studios. That's excellent. So I'm definitely going to follow that, because this is the kind of thing that I love. I'm sure there'll maybe some studios then that I'll want to call up and talk to. Seema and I can see what we see.
Yeah.
See what new games are there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure also by the time your listeners hear this, I don't know when it is, but it's running throughout all of December. So you can sign up on our website or on Twitter. You just retweet.
So this may be a couple days out of date for anybody that's listening to it, but it'll be pretty soon. So we'll get them in there. They'll still have a chance to catch a whole majority of that Advent event, which is excellent. Finally, looking at the future, there's a couple things that I think are going to help springboard you, which I wanted to touch on, and then just get your view of sort of what's next. One was the Jagex partnership.
Yeah.
So that seems to be a big, again, another sort of big next move for a studio like you guys. So why don't you talk about that, and then what you think that's going to do sort of moving forward for you, and then we'll wrap it up with just sort of a little bit of the view of the future.
Yeah, one of our takeaways from launching Earthlock 1 is publishing is really hard. Getting eyeballs is really, really hard. It's actually a skill. And we, of course, tried to learn really fast as we launched Earthlock 1. But now as we're now going into launching Iconei and moving on with producing Earthlock 2 as well, we realized we needed some more help and power and experience. And having spoken to Jagex for a whole year, actually, we now signed a deal with them, and it's really nice, like feel good, safe feeling. I have lots of friend studios who had bad publisher relationships and kind of got out of them. This does not feel like that. This feels really good. It's still just a month old, but it's not us and them. It's more like just us. We're working together. We signed all our games, also their future games, for 5 years at least. So it's really exciting. And again, like with the Epic, when I do stuff, I don't want to go all in, right? It makes more sense. Same thing. I also got married and shared economy and everything. It's like just do it properly. And so it's a very good first month. All of my team members are interfacing with that team, and it works really well. It's also an end of a chapter for Snowcastle, being perpetual, almost bankrupt for 13 years. So that's also pretty nice. Makes me sleep a little bit better at night.
Yeah, I think it's important that we found someone who was invested and cared about the IP, and not just, okay, we want to publish Iconei Island or whatever game it is.
Yeah.
But
right.
Who cares about, you can tell from this deal that they're invested into the future of the company.
And the IP. This is the IP again was the thing that they triggered on.
Which I would see being a big asset to creating this kind of partnership. Confidence in both the fact that the studio can deliver. You guys have delivered multiple products within that IP, and the quality of the IP that you've created, the quality of that universe that you've created, being able to tell new stories and having the confidence that those stories will manifest. If I was going to want to partner with a studio in a kind of a publishing arrangement, those are the kinds of things I would love to look for, and it's readily apparent with you all. So from a player perspective, from a fan perspective, that's really exciting too, because now if you love that IP, if you love Earthlock, knowing that there's now this partnership and this multi-year arrangement, and you've got sort of like that roadmap, you can be excited about things to look forward to, which is excellent. So like Seema, as you were saying, getting involved in the IP, having the sort of the next chapter, or being able to pick it up when it comes along.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't even have to be the same characters or a continuation of a story, just living in that world.
Yeah.
So we've got Iconei, we've got Earthlock. You already said, Earthlock through Earthlock 3 was sort of your vision. What else? What else do you see out there? Not even necessarily for you, but for the industry, and maybe not even something that Snowcastle would do. But is there like another game type that you guys are brainstorming about, or that you personally really like, but Snowcastle may not do? Do you first person shooter combat? I don't know what it might be. What is that looking like for you guys for the future? Any big ideas out there?
I have started contemplating a new IP for the future, but it's still too far off. We have lots of work to do. there is a thing about working on an IP for a long time, and that is IP fatigue or project fatigue. So, I mean, I think a lot of people on the would love to work on a space shooter or something completely crazy different.
Horror game for me.
Horror game, yeah. So a palette cleanser.
Okay.
So I think that is natural for anyone who works on any kind of project for a long time. It's nice with some changes, and I think I've started that process, but nothing specific yet. But obviously, it's very different from what we're doing now.
I'm a huge space genre fan. Yeah, Seema, what do you vote for?
Well, I was just going to say, I really get that point about IP fatigue, because earlier when I was talking about it, and I said, except for movies, because I really have IP fatigue right now in movies. It's sort of like, I'm not attracted to another Marvel movie, another Star Wars movie. I'm more attracted to just like, something different, please. So I totally get that.
Yeah. You can only milk that.
And yes, I vote for space.
Space. All right. So Seema's on the space side as well.
Space.
Survival in space is something I would be a fan of as well. Horror, I'm not so sure about, but boy, that's becoming a big genre of its own, and people sort of like love either like the suspense horror or the gross exploding heads type of horror.
Yeah.
Both of those are expanding rapidly. I think, but that would be quite a departure.
Yeah.
From Ikone
Island. Focus for Earthlock 2 is nature and ecosystems and a dynamic world that is evolving. And I'm a big nature geek, doing mushroom and forestering and hunting and fishing and everything. So I love to bring that into a game world, and also nature. The world is, as we all know, having some trouble with heating and carbon dioxide and stuff like that. Doesn't seem to be solved immediately. And I think that's a really interesting space to work as a game developer. And so both for Earthlock 2, probably also our future games on the Ikone series and Earthlock 3 will have that kind of stuff. But if we're to make another future IP, I'm sure we will also be focusing on nature. I think that is highly likely.
Telling the
nature,
stories.
Could it be nature on another planet?
Oh, there we go.
I'm passionate about.
I think
telling the stories that are important to us, I think is really important. So that's great.
Yeah.
I think on an even broader scope is that the studio as a whole is not afraid of taking risks when it comes to creating new ideas for projects and trying to execute them. And it's like one consistent thing so far about Snowcastle is that there's no consistency when it comes between projects. It's like something new and exciting every time. So we'll see if that trend continues.
Oh, well, that's excellent. And I think it's something really for the fans of Snowcastle in general to be really excited about. This has been excellent. Now in my mind, I'm brainstorming all of the games I want you guys to make for us. So
yes,
we're definitely gonna have to stay connected and see where you take the current IP, what new IP gets created, and what new games get created as well. I would love to see the rest of Ikone Island, and I'm going to be ready for that on my Steam Deck. So thanks a ton for all of what you've produced so far, and I can't wait to see more.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
This has been a New Overlords production. For more, please visit newoverlords.com for video, subscribe and feed links, and other ways to help the show.